The recruits had gathered in the long hall of the Croftian Academy. Their scales were bright and fresh, shining with the youth of their first molt. They were restless, filled with pride and questions. But when the old commander entered, the room grew still. His scales were no longer bright. They had dulled to ash gray, as though time itself had worn the life from them. His steps were heavy, and his eyes carried the weight of memories that were not meant to be spoken. He looked across the room, and in a voice both low and sharp, he spoke the forbidden name, the Valari Dominion. The recruits froze. Even the air seemed colder. Some shifted nervously, tails brushing against the floor. It was a name not spoken in their lifetime, a name whispered only in shadows. The commander's mandibles clicked faintly, a sound that made the young flinch. He looked around, making sure no one outside could hear. Then he leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that cut through the silence. That was the last species that made humans angry, and we don't talk about them anymore. The recruits leaned forward. Their curiosity burned brighter than their fear. One of them, braver than the rest, dared to ask a question. Why not? The commander's mandibles clicked again. Was it a laugh, or was it the memory of terror? With Croftians, it was hard to know. He stepped into the light, his shadow stretching across the young faces. His eyes narrowed, and he spoke words that pressed like stones on their chests. Because they don't exist anymore. Not their fleets, not their colonies, not even their memory. When humans get truly angry, he paused, his voice trembling, as if dragging it out from wounds that never healed. They don't just defeat you. They erase you. Gasps ran through the room. The recruits had heard tales of conquests, of empires lost, a planet scorched. But erase? That was different. Defeat left scars. Erasure left nothing. The commander lowered himself onto the ancient seat at the center of the hall. The metal groaned under his weight. His eyes turned away from the present, staring into the past, into days when the galaxy had still been wide and unbroken. 40 cycles ago, he began, the galaxy was not as you know it now. The Valari Dominion ruled 17 systems. Their fleets were like frozen light, ships of crystal and fire. Beautiful, deadly. They carved through lesser civilizations like an artist carved stone. They saw themselves as gods, cold, perfect, certain of their place above all others. He paused, his mandibles tight with memory. The recruits leaned forward, hanging on his words. And then, the commander said, his voice deep and filled with weight, humanity appeared. Some of the young hissed with surprise. To them, humans were strange and soft, too small, too polite, too eager to smile. They laughed too much. They apologized too often. They looked harmless. The commander's glare silenced their foolishness. His eyes held no amusement, only warning. They were new to the stars, he continued. Still weak, still healing from near extinction. They had 3 colonies, a few retrofitted ships, a species that bowed too easily, that smiled too much at councils. The Valari looked at them the way predators look at limping prey. The recruits shifted uneasily. They could imagine it. The Valari tested them. The commander whispered. Their first strike was against a human farming colony. It was called Haven. 40,000 souls lived there. Families, children, people who had never held weapons. The Valari destroyed it, and they did it in full view of the galaxy. They wanted us all to watch. They hunted the escape pods for sport. They turned survivors into nutrient paste for their tanks. And when the humans asked for the remains of their dead, the Valari sent back containers marked return to sender. The hall was silent now. The recruits did not move. They did not even blink. Every species watched. The commander said. We all wondered. How would the humans answer? Would they beg for mercy? Would they offer tribute? Would they disappear quietly into the shadows of history? But they did none of these things. For 7 days, Earth was silent. No words, no threats, no cries of pain. Only silence. The Valari believed this meant surrender. His voice grew colder, and the recruits' tails twitched in fear. They were wrong. He leaned forward, his voice a whisper, but sharp as a blade. On the 8th day, something shifted in human space. It was not their ships, they were still weak. It was not their numbers, they were still outnumbered 1,000 to 1. It was something else. Something older. Something that all predators should have known to fear. Their anger. The recruits could feel it now, a chill creeping into their scales. It was not loud anger, the commander said. It was quiet, cold, surgical. They stared at him, their hearts pounding. The first signs came with the shipping logs, he explained. Human freighters, mining rigs, ice haulers, all vanished from trade routes. Earth only said one thing: we are repurposing resources. The Valari laughed. They thought humans were fools. What could old freighters do against the finest fleet in the galaxy? The commander's tail twitched, a memory of old fear that never left him. But the Valari never got the chance to laugh again, because what the humans built with those ships, his voice cracked, eyes dim with a memory of fire, changed everything. The recruits leaned forward. Their scales trembled. The room was silent, waiting for the next word. The commander closed his eyes. When he opened them, they burned like dying stars. It began at Kepler-42. The recruits held their breath as the commander spoke. His voice was no longer just telling a story. It was pulling them into the past, into a moment that changed the galaxy forever. At Kepler-42, the commander began. The galaxy expected a battle. But what happened was something else. It was not war. It was not conquest. It was something worse. His eyes turned dark, reflecting memories no one wished to carry. The recruits leaned forward, their scales brushing the edges of their seats. 300 human ships appeared on the edge of the Valari Prime system, he said. They were not warships. They were not sleek or powerful. They were old freighters, welding rigs, asteroid miners, ice haulers. They were ships held together with scrap and determination. Their crews were volunteers, farmers, miners, mechanics. Some had written the names of their children on the bulkheads. Some carried photos of those lost at Haven welded into the walls. He paused, the weight of silence pressing down on the recruits. The Valari fleet was 10 times larger, the commander continued. Their admirals placed bets on how many minutes the human fleet would last. To them, it was a joke. To them, the humans were prey animals trying to snarl before being eaten. But they did not understand. They did not see what was coming. The recruits shivered. The humans did not try to match ship for ship, the commander said. They did something different, something the galaxy had never seen. Each human ship was not carrying bombs. Each human ship was a bomb. The recruits gasped. One even covered his mouth, scales flickering pale with shock. Yes, the commander said. Their engines were overloaded. Their reactors were rigged to cascade. Their holds were filled with mining charges. 300 ships, 300 flying weapons, 300 sacrifices. The room shook with the weight of his words. The Valari fired first, he said. Plasma lances cut through ships like fire through cloth. Singularity weapons bent space itself, tearing vessels apart. Entire groups of humans were wiped out in seconds. But it was not enough, because even if 90% of a ship was gone, if its engine core still burned, it kept moving forward. It kept accelerating. It kept aiming for the heart of the Valari. The recruits trembled. They had learned about bravery. They had learned about courage. But this was something else. The first ship to break through, the commander said, was called a Remembrance. It was once a cargo hauler. The crew had welded pictures of Haven's dead across every wall, every surface, every door. When it broke through the Valari lines, it did not slow. It did not stop. It hit Valari Prime at 70% of light speed. The recruits gasped, claws tightening on their seats. Have you ever seen a planet die? The commander asked softly. His voice carried the silence of graves. Not bombarded. Not conquered. Die. The impact turned the air to fire, the crust to liquid, the oceans to steam. In a single moment, The heart of the Valari Empire was gone. 20 billion souls burned away. Their sun itself dimmed beneath the blast. The room was silent. Even the lights above seemed to hold their breath. But the humans were not finished, the commander said. That was only the beginning. They had warned us once. We had laughed. We did not laugh for long. He leaned closer, his voice heavy with sorrow. They called it Operation Empty Sky, he whispered, because that is what they left behind. Empty space, where once there had been worlds. The humans did not come to conquer. They did not come to rule. They came to remove. The recruit's scales rippled in fear. Every Valari world, the commander said, every station, every outpost, they destroyed them all. Not with armies, not with occupation, but with fire and silence. They erased them. They left behind nothing but ruins and ash, and then even the ash was scattered. They gave no speeches. They made no demands. They offered no mercy. The Valari begged for terms, but how do you surrender to silence? They offered tribute, but how do you buy forgiveness for slaughtered children? The only answer they received was more ships, more impacts, more empty skies. One recruit dared to whisper, "Why didn't the council stop them?" The commander's eyes turned cold. "They tried," he said. "The council begged for peace. Other species sent diplomats, fleets, mediators. They all called for negotiation. The humans sent one message back. For words, they killed our children. And after that, nothing more." The recruits trembled. Their claws scraped against the floor, their scales pale. The Valari thought they were gods, the commander said. But even gods fall when they awaken something older, something more dangerous. The humans were not fighting for power. They were fighting for their children. And nothing in the galaxy is stronger than that. He looked across the room, his old eyes hard as stone. The Valari Dominion did not fall at Kepler-42, he said. It ended there. Their story ended. Their name ended. The humans made sure of it. The recruits stared at him, their eyes wide with fear, their scales trembling with the weight of what they had heard. The commander's voice dropped into a whisper, and that, young ones, was only the beginning. The recruits did not move. Their hearts pounded as the commander's words echoed in the silent hall. His voice carried weight, like stone pressing down on their chests. They had thought they knew what war was. They had studied battles, victories, defeats. But what the humans did was something else. It was not war. It was erasure. The old commander leaned forward, his mandibles clicking faintly. His eyes, dim with age, burned with a memory of fire. Kepler-42 was a beginning, he said. But what came after, that is what we call Operation Empty Sky. The recruits tilted their heads, their scales rustling softly. The name itself was strange, almost poetic. The commander saw their curiosity and nodded slowly. They called it that because that is what they left behind. Empty skies where once there had been worlds. Entire star systems, erased. The recruits swallowed hard. The humans spread like a storm, the commander said. They came not to conquer. They did not land armies. They did not raise flags. They came only to destroy. Their fleets moved system to system, faster than any of us expected. Mining ships, freighters, ice haulers turned into weapons, each one a flying grave, each one a sacrifice. The room grew colder as he spoke. The Valari tried to defend themselves. The commander continued. They gathered their fleets, their admirals, their gods of war. But none of it mattered, because the humans were not fighting for land. They were not fighting for glory. They were fighting for memory, for vengeance, for their dead children. He paused, his voice trembling, as though each word was carved from his own scars. The Valari begged for surrender. They sent messages of apology. They sent treasures, slaves, ships of gold and crystal. But the humans did not answer. They sent more silence, and then more fire. The Valari did not understand. They thought this was about revenge, about punishment. But it was not. The humans wanted something greater. They wanted to erase the Valari completely, not just their bodies, not just their worlds, but their very memory. The recruits shivered. The galaxy watched in horror, the commander said. We all watched, and we were helpless. Some species thought to interfere. Some thought to defend the Valari, or at least to slow the humans. But how do you stop a people who are willing to die for every strike? How do you fight those who have already chosen death as their weapon? The recruits' eyes widened. The council begged for peace, the commander said. Ambassadors sent pleas. Fleet commanders threatened sanctions. The humans did not respond. They sent one final message, the last they ever spoke of the war. 4 words, this ends when they end. After that, there was only silence and death. The commander's voice grew heavy. Some Valari tried to run, he said. They fled to neutral systems. They begged other species for asylum. Some were taken and hidden, protected, but the humans found them anyway. Not with fleets, not with bombs, but with single operatives, men and women who carried lists. They did not storm cities. They did not raise weapons in public. They simply appeared, and one by one, the Valari vanished. No screams, no fights. They simply ceased to exist. The recruits gasped. This was a war unlike any they had ever studied. It was not loud. It was not filled with banners or drums. It was quiet, relentless, inevitable. The Valari tried to fight back with terror of their own, the commander said. They struck at human colonies. They tried to kill civilians. But it was already too late. Every strike only sharpened the human silence. Every life taken only gave more fuel to their fire. And still, the humans came, until one day there was almost nothing left. His eyes dimmed, lost in the ashes of memory. The last Valari stronghold was a mining world far from their heartlands. The humans came in silence. No threats, no warnings, only fire. The world burned. Their stations fell. And when it was done, the Valari were gone. Entire species, erased from the galaxy. The recruits sat frozen. Their scales no longer gleamed with youth. Fear had dimmed them. But the humans did not stop there, the commander said softly. They did something worse than killing. They erased the Valari from memory itself. Their names were deleted from archives. Their art, their music, their history, gone. Their star systems removed from charts. Their language unspoken. It was as if they had never been. The only record left was silence. And those of us who remember. The recruit stared at him in shock. You think humans are weak because they smile, the commander said, his voice sharp now. But I have seen what happens when they stop smiling. I have seen the skies turned empty. I have seen gods fall silent. And I tell you now, when humans are angry, they do not just defeat you. They unmake you. The hole was so silent it seemed the air itself had vanished. One recruit dared to whisper, Commander, if they erase the Valari, why do you still remember them? The old commander's scales rippled with unease. His mandibles clicked once, hard, like the breaking of bone. Because the humans wanted us to remember, he said. They left witnesses. Not many, just enough. Enough to spread the warning. Enough to carry the fear. Enough to make sure no one, ever again, gives them a reason to stop smiling. The recruits sat stiff, their bodies shaking. The old commander leaned back, his eyes heavy, his voice now nothing more than a whisper. That was a lesson of Operation Empty Sky, he said, and that is why we do not talk about the Valari. The recruits did not move when the commander fell silent. The whole was heavy with the weight of memory. They wanted to ask more, but their throats felt too dry, too tight. The story of the Valari was not just history. It was a ghost. The commander sat very still, his old scales dull in the dim light. Then, after a long pause, his voice returned, softer than before. You think the Valari were finished when their last worlds burned, he said. But there was one more story. The last piece. The part the humans themselves tried to bury. The recruits leaned forward, heart thudding. It was a child, the commander whispered. The last Valari child. She was barely past hatching when the war began. She had never held a weapon. She had never seen her homeworld. She was hidden on a mining station in neutral space, far from the war. She thought she was safe. The recruit's eyes widened. But the humans found her, the commander said. Not a fleet, not a bomb, just one operative, a woman whose name was never recorded. She carried a list with one final name, the child's name. The recruits shifted nervously in their seats. The operative looked at the child, the commander said, and for the first time in all the war, she hesitated. This child had done nothing. She was innocent. She was alone. The operative opened her communicator. She spoke to Earth. For a long time, she listened. And then, the commander closed his eyes. His voice cracked with a memory. She apologized to the child, a real apology, and then she completed her mission. Because 40,000 children on Haven never got the chance to grow up either. The recruits froze, their scales pale. Their stomachs churned with the horror of it. That was the last Valari, the commander said. After that, there were no more. Not in the stars, not in the streets, not even in memory. They were gone, erased, and the humans went home. He leaned back, his voice gaining strength again. They returned to their colonies. They rebuilt. They smiled once more at diplomatic gatherings. They laughed. They traded. They helped weaker species. And never once did they boast. Never once did they threaten. They simply lived as if nothing had happened, as if the skies had never been emptied. But those of us who were there, those who saw it, we remembered, and we still remember. The recruit scales rippled uneasily. When new species meet the humans, the commander said, they see friendly faces. They see kindness. They see laughter. They wonder why the rest of us are so nervous around them. They ask why we whisper when humans enter the room. They do not understand. His eyes darkened. But we do, he said. We remember what lies beneath that smile. We remember what happens when they stop smiling. A species that will burn the stars themselves for their children. A species that does not just defeat its enemies, but unmakes them. A species that weaponized emptiness itself. The recruits shuddered. Their claws scraped softly against the floor. The commander rose slowly, his joints creaking. His shadow stretched across the hole, tall and sharp. So when you say beside humans, he said, his voice booming now, remember this. They will share their food with you. They will laugh at your jokes. They will risk their lives for yours. They will be the best allies you will ever know. But never, never give them a reason to stop smiling. The recruits sat stiff as statues. None spoke. None dared. At last, they began to rise, filing out in silence. Their scales were dim, their eyes haunted. Each one carried the weight of the story. Each one carried the warning. But one recruit lingered. He was young, too young to know fear properly. His scales still shimmered with the brightness of youth. He turned to the old commander and asked, in a trembling voice, Commander, what if someone makes him angry again? The commander turned to the star map that glowed on the wall. Once, 17 Valari systems had burned brightly there. Now, only empty black voids remained, marked as uncharted space, navigation hazard. The old commander stared at that darkness for a long time. His scales shifted slowly, dull ash to pale silver, as though his body remembered grief his voice could not carry. Then he answered, his voice as heavy as stone. Then, he said, we will have another name we do not talk about. The hole dimmed as the lights faded, leaving only the glow of dead stars. The recruits walked away in silence, their hearts cold, their minds heavy with the story. And somewhere, far across the galaxy, humans laughed and loved and lived their small lives on their small worlds. Every other species prayed they would keep smiling, because the alternative had already been written in the empty sky.